good to be back here and see everyone for another monthly three-ring circus update. We did something like this a while ago. We were just debating about when it was. I kind of think it was about a year ago. We didn't actually check, but given all the changes that have happened in our world since early March, we felt like this was a good opportunity to go back and kind of not just reshare what we shared before, but share a lot of the things that we've learned over this period of time. As many of you are probably doing or working to transition to do, we continue to deliver many things virtually. Right from where I'm standing, it's more often Josh than it is me, but right from where I'm standing, we're delivering these virtual keynotes and all kinds of sessions and trainings and workshops. And we use a lot of the learning that we've picked up over the years. It's definitely been a journey, a quest for us to get from sort of where we went from a technology standpoint to where we are today. No different than the Keynote world. It's been exactly the same thing. And so we're going to share some of that with you. We're going to share some of the things that we've learned over the years, and we are going to share and, of course, answer any questions that you may have. Always trying to be as helpful as we possibly can be. So with that, oh, great. So with that, I want everyone to kind of think about technology and delivering virtual keynotes like any other kind of performance. This is sometimes what we think about when we think about a football game and kind of the greatness of it, what the NFL does at the Super Bowl. But that's not the only football game that there is, of course. There's football games like this, and that's how many of those players started, how we may have started playing football or any other sport. It's true with anything else. We think of dance nowadays. This is what dancing is, but of course, this is not what dancing is for most of us. This is more like what dancing is, right? You're learning new things. You're nervous. You're trying things out. You're making mistakes. It's true when you're off in TV land and you think about doing a broadcast like this, which is similar in a lot of respects. Think about a gorgeous studio like they have here at Rockefeller Center for NBC Nightly News. But that's not what our studios tend to look like. They tend to look much more like this, if even that. And that's okay. Those can work just fine for our purposes. Of course, there's always things to add, but it's all part of the process. It's all part of the quest that we're on and that we are on together. Same thing here. You see the fancy truck when they're producing something at a sporting event or when they're doing the news or any other live broadcast. And this is much more like what live production or post-production video editing looks like for many of us in iMovie or one of a zillion different programs. So today I want to share with you 8 important things to consider, no matter where you are, no matter where any of us are in the video keynote evolution. Okay, first up, your camera. And Connor, I don't know why this is, but for some reason, I think it's on the switch over there. I'm unable to see the other little details that I was seeing before, but it's not a big deal if you can't fix it. So first up is your camera. Any camera really, it's okay. You can just leave it. Any camera really works. Honestly, you can take the camera on your cell phone, iPhones, many Samsung Android devices work great, or you can use a much fancier camera. There's, of course, benefits the more features you have and the more money that you have that you've invested in it, but an iPhone camera works amazingly well. The cameras on them are better than they've ever been, especially some of the fancier models. Each one just kind of outdoes the one the year before. But there's a couple things to keep in mind when you're thinking about your camera. The first thing is you want to use the back lens of the camera. So the selfie mode, the thing that we're using on social media all the time, what we use to do in different kinds of chat and FaceTime, that sort of thing, is always a worse camera. It's less stable. It has lower resolution. None of the manufacturers upgraded as much. So use the back camera. If you like the idea of being able to see what's on the back camera and you can't do it very easily, totally fine. Find a spot to put the camera. Go ahead and record something. Go watch it. Record something else. Go watch it. Keep making adjustments. Do it 15 times until you get it right. It's absolutely worth it. Another thing you're going to want to look at if you're using a phone camera is your settings. You want to make sure that you're using generally the highest video quality settings that you can. So at least something that's full HD, often called 1080p by the number of vertical pixels in the screen. And another thing you want to look at is the frame rate. You'll see things like 24 and 29.97 and 30 and 60. You want a higher frame rate because remember, video is just a series of pictures. The higher the frame rate, the more pictures they're taking and generally the smoother video. Now, when you're broadcasting this video over the internet like we're doing today, it's a little less important because software like Zoom and other things tend to limit that frame rate. It's limited by what they're willing to support over the internet. But if you're recording a video, if you're doing something for a keynote and then putting it together and shipping it off to a client, that video recording, that frame rate and that quality is very, very important. You want to give them the highest quality file that you possibly can. So a couple things to think about there when it comes to your camera. Next up is your lighting. Um, these lights are this pictures of is actually by a company called Elgato, Elgato. I think these are called their air lights, but we have some of them in our studio. The other version that they make, the more mainstream one, they work great. They're super cost effective. You can control them with an app. You can set the color temperature. They're not hot. They're LED. They don't weigh much. They're not overly priced. They're really, really good. You can put them in stands and clip them all over the place. We've had great success with these over the last couple of years and continue to purchase more. But when you're using lighting like this, you want to be thinking about a few things. First of all, you want to think about what you're lighting. So you're lighting, obviously, the subject, you likely as the speaker. So you can't tell the lighting, no matter, first of all, it's hard to tell if it's just you, but even with someone else, until you're looking at it after the recording, you don't really know how the lighting is necessarily going to look. It can make you look washed out. It might give you too much redness in your color. There could be issues with shadows. You might have some shininess on your face because there's too much light, too much color, too much light coming up on this part of your body or somewhere else. So those things are all very important that you want to take a look at. Second is you're often lighting a background. It could be a scene behind you. If you have some furniture or a bookcase that you're using, if you have a green screen, which is becoming more and more common for all of us, that's a very important thing to make sure is lit properly because the shadows on the green screen create different colors green. Some of them are brighter, lighter green, darker green, and the software, depending on what you're using, has more of a difficult time trying to discern those different colors. So you want to make sure you're evenly lighting the subject, that you're evenly lighting the background, that if it's a green screen that you're lighting that very appropriately. And you're also generally looking for shadows, that you have lights coming at different angles and the shadows are crossing each other out. Now, there's all kinds of things online on that. You can learn about the different ways to do it, but one of the best ways, frankly, is trial and error. Set it up, you'll watch it, won't look very good. You'll try something else, it's better. You'll tweak a little more, and then it gets worse. And you just play with it. And it's a constant evolution. We're constantly improving it. Lighting is something that will continue to get better. One other thing to mention, many lights offer you the option to change the color temperature. And I mean color by temperature, it's kind of the blueness of the white light versus kind of the warmth, the redness, the light. And if you're familiar with it, they state things in Kelvin numbers. The lower Kelvin number means more redness. The higher Kelvin number means more blueness. You've probably seen it if you bought a light bulb for your house, a fluorescent bulb or an LED bulb. Sometimes they're more blue or not. That's what that is. And one, it's a preference, of course, in your house or in a place of work, but it's also important when it comes to video because you don't want to make someone look too blue. You don't want to make someone look like they just were in a sunburn. So many of these lights, even these simple Elgato ones, which again are either $120, $140, depending on the model, allow you a lot of flexibility with that. And so you can go around and take the time to play with all this kind of stuff and see what really looks best. So there's some general thoughts up on lighting. Next up is your computer. Few tips on the computer. First of all, I get questions all the time. Is it better to use a Mac or use a PC? I hear a Mac is better for video and creative stuff, but I've always used a PC my whole life. Here's a general rule of thumb. Again, this is my opinion, just my opinion. My opinion is whatever you're more comfortable with will work. Yes, we use both here. I've used both my whole life. I do tend to think Macs are better for this kind of thing, and that's my preference. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with using a PC. If you've been using a PC for 20 years and not a Mac, I do not recommend switching to a Mac to go ahead and start, doing remote video keynotes. Just use whatever you're most comfortable with. When you're using your computer, there's a couple things to keep in mind, especially for these live broadcasts. So when you're using something like Zoom or GoToWebinar or WebEx or any one of these million platforms, a million more than even existed a few months ago, a few things to keep in mind. First of all, it's always a good idea to restart your computer right before you start setting up for your talk. Even if you just restart it earlier in the day or the day before, just as time goes on, more things come up, more things can happen. It tends to be less stable. Number two is make sure you have the least amount of software running. That might be, if you're using Zoom, your Zoom client and PowerPoint, and that's it. You want to close out of everything else. Sometimes things are running in the background in the Mac. You'll see in toolbars or on a PC, extra stuff that pops up. Turn all that stuff off. Just like for a live keynote, disable all the notifications. If you're not using sound from your computer, make sure the sound's disabled. Just get rid of everything else that you're not using. Always something good to think about. Another thing you want to look at is making sure your software is current for your video platforms. We use Zoom, as probably many people do. We use Zoom more than anything else. What you're seeing today is a Zoom broadcast, as you know. We're doing some funky things to get us all kind of get me and these slides together, which we can share later. But um, Zoom very frequently updates their software. They update their software on Macs and they update their software on PCs. They add a lot of features and they also like squash a lot of different bugs. And it's important that you're keeping up to date on that. From our experience, we've actually found that they don't introduce really any instability. That they add security, they add features, they add stability. The updates happen pretty quickly. So as a general rule, anytime we're going ahead to go ahead and look at this, we do a quick update, quick check, see if there's any new software updates, and if there are, we go ahead and implement those. Okay, that's for your computer. Next up is your internet connection. This is one I do not hear talked about enough and is really, really important. People often say, oh, my internet connection is not very good. It's not fast enough. Oh, I hate Comcast, AT&T, wow, fill in whatever your local your ever service provider is. Here's the reality. In most instances, especially at home, our Wi-Fi is not very good. That signal coming from our combo router modem that many of us lease or we purchase to wherever we are in the house, even if you have multiple extended devices, is usually unstable. Things don't go that well, especially on the upload side, which is really, really important if you're broadcasting a keynote. As much as download's important all the time, what you're seeing right now for me is very much dependent on my upload speed. So while your internet connection, it's always better to have a faster internet connection. The single best thing you can do right now is have a hardwired connection. And that doesn't necessarily mean I got to get someone to run a bunch of cables through my drywall and put in some jacks and get a big fancy router. It usually doesn't mean any of that. Usually what it means is just get a long enough cord, run it from the back of your cable modem up to where your computer is. If you have an Ethernet jack, great. If you don't, go buy one. They make them for Macs, PCs. Apple makes them. Every third-party provider makes them. And plug it in. Turn off your Wi-Fi and plug it in. It will be faster. It will be more stable. It'll just be better. If you find that it's cutting out after that point, even on a wired internet connection, then you have a different issue. Most likely there's something wrong with your piece of equipment or the connectivity to it from your internet service provider, and go ahead and give them a call. But it's totally worth investment in an inexpensive cable just to be hardwired. By the way, you'll find other things work great too. If you're like uploading files to Dropbox and sending things, everything is faster wired. Internet that's wireless is super convenient. It is not good news when it comes to sharing a keynote. All right, number 5, your microphone. So microphones are very important things. In fact, I would argue that your voice and how your voice sounds coming across a keynote, whether it's recorded or it's a live broadcast, is as important, sometimes even more important than the visual. So please make sure that you have a decent quality microphone. Examples of bad microphones: the microphone on your camera, bad. The microphone on your phone, bad. The microphone on your computer, generally bad. So you want another third-party microphone. What is better is, first of all, some kind of pair of earbuds of some kind, like Apple EarPods or any other manufacturer. That's a step up. Apple makes AirPods, which like so many people have now, or now these AirPod Pros, which are really nice. That's better. But what's even better is a standalone mic. They make a bunch now that are pretty cost effective. They're not super complicated. They're not like hardwired and require a whole audio board. They're just simple mics. This is one by Blue. It's called a Yeti mic. This is their pro version. They make a less expensive non-pro version that works great also. It's really easy to use. It has a couple knobs on it on the back. One is where basically the polar pattern, where the sound is coming from, which is an obvious setting. You just set it to the one person setting. There's a setting for the gain, which is how loud your voice is being pulled into that microphone and sent to wherever it's being sent. And a general rule of thumb is keep the gain low. If you're not sure between two settings where it should be, pick the lower one. There are a lot of ways to make it louder later on. It's a lot harder to make it lower. You can make the volume lower afterwards, but you're going to be picking up all this extraneous noise in your area, wherever you're recording, in your house, your office, anything like that. And then, of course, beyond that, you can you can go crazy. We have these, we use a Shure mic that I'm talking into now, which is a little more expensive and a little bit more complicated. But even beyond that, you can, you'll see audio files say, oh, I only use this mic and it's $2,000. That's overkill for anything that we would use. But the important thing here, again, is get a dedicated microphone. Headphones. You need to be able to hear. This is especially, for live keynotes. If you're just talking and doing a rehearsed keynote, it really doesn't matter. But for a live keynote, you need to hear. You can still use things like AirPods, which work great. You can use a third-party microphone, like the one I just showed you, or something else, and still use AirPods, and have the volume come in. They're kind of hidden, especially the pros. Women with longer hair, it hides it even better than for the guys. This is another thing. They make these. You'll see. You probably can't even really see it on me, but I'm wearing one of those. It essentially plugs into the headphone jack of a laptop or any computer, and it's clear and really there's a little speaker that kind of goes through this $20 piece of plastic and pops into your ear and allows it so you can't see it. You'll see it on TV anchors sometimes, or when they get mad at their producer, it's making a noise, they'll throw it out of their ear. But that's a great kind of little step up. It keeps it kind of hidden. People don't really realize it, and I can hear everything that's being said to me as you would be able to as well. Hard surfaces. Okay, here's things that are bad for recording any kind of audio. Hard flooring without carpeting, bad. Exposed mechanicals or exposed ceilings, bad. Any kind of like a lack of furniture, like no couches and no pillows, that's bad. No window drapings, that's bad. If it's just a concrete floor, maybe some drywall, if that, and an exposed mechanicals like in your basement, not good. Because you get this echo. And while that echo may be fine if you're having a conversation with your friend, it sounds worse on a phone call, and it's extremely distracting when you're recording a video and recording audio like this. All these things that in normal conversations, if you're at a restaurant, remember restaurants, we used to eat at those, when you're at a restaurant and you go and you're having a conversation, it's loud and it may be a little annoying, but you deal with that. If that's a recording, it's unlistenable too. So part of that is that echo. And so having hard surfaces is a challenge. So I would encourage you to pick a spot in your house or wherever you're doing it that has some carpet, that has some soft furniture. Even if you're in the back of a bedroom and you have a bed, great. If you have windows that, of course, are away from the shop, but you got some soft draperies, window treatments on it, that's great. Pillows, anything that's soft. Drywall, while not the best thing ever, is way better than an exposed ceiling with a bunch of metal and HVAC ducting. These are foam panels, which we use here, and I'll be showing you in a little bit. These are not very expensive. You can buy them in different sizes and thicknesses. You can put them everywhere, all over your floor and ceiling if you have a dedicated space. If you just want to put them a few strategically and almost make like a decoration out of it, it will help deaden that sound. They're really useful. They make different colors. You can kind of make a design out of them. But again, do your best to try and avoid the hard surfaces as best as you possibly can. Next up is, there we go, a quiet space. So in Home Alone, he was afraid of a quiet space and being home alone. When you're delivering a keynote, being alone in a quiet space is a wonderful thing. The fewer people that are around, the farther you are from your front door with a doorbell ringing, lack of pets, lack of kids, lack of significant others, lack of the guy cutting the lawn, whatever it is, quiet spaces are wonderful because then that noise doesn't get picked up onto your microphone. It doesn't distract you. It doesn't do anything to bother you. So we really try and find a quiet space. Being home alone is great, but if you're not, try and find some place where that no one's gonna come and bother you. In fact, I just saw a funny Facebook post the other day from a friend of mine who's an attorney. He was in trial, and it was a virtual trial. So he was doing like over Zoom or whatever at the courthouse. He was doing closing arguments. He made this list of reasons to disturb dad. Like your sister just punched you. Wrong. The house is on fire. Let me burn. Like all these things. Like do not disturb under any circumstance. So same kind of thing here. If you're gonna go do this, especially live, try and get it away from everybody else. So as I mentioned, this is a process. So we are, 10 years into our process here of continuing to grow what we can do from a remote deliverability standpoint and record things. We do a number of things here in the studio. So we do live events like this. We do recorded stuff, which some of you have been here to actually do some recordings for different keynotes and creating sizzle reels. We do a podcast out of here, so we do a live recording of the podcast. We do some music with Josh, so he does a bunch of jazz recordings in here. So there's a number of different purposes. So we have some things in here that allow us to convert this studio for that. In fact, when this is over, 30 minutes later, we have an interview with a retired U.S. Army 3-star general that we're doing for our podcast. And so we have a producer in LA and all these people involved. So there's a lot of flexibility here. People always ask, why is it called Sump Pump Studios? If you've been here, there's a sign outside and it's called Sump Pump Studios. And that is because when we started this, we used to do it in the basement of Josh's house. And we had none of this. We had an inexpensive camera. We had a little microphone. We had no sound deadening. I had some terrible lighting. And we had a sump pump that would go off about every, 10, 11 minutes. And you had to time it right so that we were recording and when the sump pump was not going off. Because if he ran a little bit long or anything happened, that sump pump would then go off and we'd get on this big whooshing sound on our audio and it would sound terrible and we'd have to start all over. So we like the name. We still call it Sump Pump Studios, but it kind of gives you a flavor of what we've dealt with in the past, and we still deal with from time to time. Fire alarms. It's hot in here. We don't have the right HVAC. All that kind of stuff. Power outages. It's crazy. So with that, Connor, who some of you know, is sitting here with a little GoPro. We're going to switch over to that camera right now. I'm going to show you a few of the things that are going on in this studio. So let me see where I'm looking here. Okay, I'm looking over there. So basically what you're looking at right now is a little station that we have. Couple inexpensive small monitors. You'll see a set of headphones and that kind of thing. That's often where I'm sitting or someone else is sitting when Josh is delivering a keynote. I might be monitoring some questions, Q&A that's coming in. I might be just making sure everything sounds right, but it's an opportunity for someone if they come in and visit and record something and they kind of want to watch on the side, it's out of the picture and they can go ahead and kind of watch and observe and do their own thing. I'm going to step out of the way here for a second, and you'll see this green screen and this gray screen. So this green screen behind it is what we use often because we are able to then project whatever image behind it that we want, which is really, really helpful. For certain things like this, we use a gray screen because it allows us to do different things where we can put the slide and the presenter, in this case me, on the screen, and we kind of like that look. So the video switcher we have doesn't allow us to, when we're usually doing part of a screen, only swap out the green screen in that scenario. So we, instead of going ahead and replacing our already expensive video switcher with one that was $10,000 more expensive, we bought a $50 screen and put it up there with some clips. But sometimes you'll see the green and sometimes you'll see it without it. We have a microphone hanging right here, Shure microphone, which is great. We use a couple of those for different purposes. We got the Elgato key light, which I mentioned. Again, these are pretty inexpensive. Oh, you probably can't hear me that good when I'm over here. I forgot about that. But these lights are pretty inexpensive, the Elgato lights and the Shure microphone. And then over here, essentially, we have a number of different computers. We started with one computer. You're like, all right, I got a PowerPoint and a Zoom, and they will go ahead and take care of everything you need. But over time, we had to do other things. We need to show some videos, and we needed to record one view in Zoom and broadcast a different view. And so with that, when we had an older computer that we used, we have a PC in here that's pretty old. Then one day we needed to do something nicer, so we bought a new Mac. We have a video switcher, which is something we added more recently, which allows us to switch kind of between different camera angles. This we actually bought used. We went out on eBay and found it, which is a great source. You can find things less expensively that way that are like almost never used. These days, there's a lot of that going on because so many people are going ahead and buying equipment to go build out these virtual studios for whether they're delivering keynotes like us or performing music or anything along those lines. And then we have an audio board over here, something that we upgraded more recently just because we have different sources of audio. This is something also that we didn't have for a long time and really isn't necessary in many cases. Remember, we're doing some weird things in here with Josh playing on guitar and having an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar and overdubbing music and things. So we have to build in some abilities here that we can take care of podcast scenarios and movie and music scenarios and live keynotes and recorded keynotes and filming other video segments. We want to make sure that if he's going to appear on the news that we can go ahead and do that and they're getting as good of a shot as possible and know it's reliable. But just like the home studio, we hardwire the internet here. We're staying away from wireless. Our wireless is pretty good in the office, but it's not always great. So hardwired is a good solution there. Different webcams for different things. We have webcams that we're not using right now, but like when we do our podcast, we have a webcam. So Connor, who sits over here and manages most of the technology, our producer can then, and our guest can then go ahead and see him and he can communicate with them. So even for audio only things, that video can be very, very helpful. So the only other piece here is sort of what is in the other side of me right now as Connor goes ahead and spins around, and that is our camera. We have really one main camera in here. It's a Canon camera. We've had it a couple years now. Uh, Pretty happy with it, but it's not like some crazy $10,000 camera. It's a nice camera. We got a nice lens, but again, not too crazy. We have something by a company called Prompter People, which makes teleprompters and allows both to use it as a prompter, but also to go ahead and use it and have um, have other images displayed on it. So when I'm talking to you, I was able to see my slides, or in a little bit, Connor will be able to switch it, and I'll be able to see each of you as we kind of have a dialogue and talk. We have a clock. This is not a fancy clock at all. It's not the one of the ones you'll see at the keynotes for like $2,000. This is an Amazon clock. Excuse me. It costs about, I don't know, 50, 60 bucks. It's got a hard to use remote, but once you figure it out, it works great. Gives us our time of day, 2:26. We can also do a countdown timer, basic things like that that are really helpful when you're delivering a keynote in here. And of course, we have other monitors. This we a lot of times use for the chat during our podcast, so that Josh can go ahead and see what the producer is saying to him while not having to like kind of like grab a laptop and start typing and all that. It's kind of always in front of him. So you probably noticed the foam around here. We have the foam, a version of the foam that we mentioned, which is great. This is a concrete floor. We put a big black rug that we ordered on Amazon on it. We have a couple desks that are just desks that also came off Amazon. The foam, we can get on Amazon. We got somewhere else, but it's just drywall, exposed mechanicals. We stapled and glued it to the ceiling. Those lights you look up there to keep it bright in here when our really hot broadcast lights are off are simply Home Depot silver 99-cent things. We've screwed in an LED bulb and they're on pretty much all the time. So there's a little bit of light in here when we turn these lights off. GoPro is an old used GoPro from about 6 years ago that we use for these kinds of things and just to keep some memories and get some wider shots. But there you go. There's a sense of kind of what this is like. And you'll see elements of inexpensive that we've had a long time and things that are a little fancier that we needed more recently. And when we upgrade, we often just sell something that we had. We put it on eBay. Matt on our team is fantastic at that. Find something that costs $800, we sell it 2 years later for $650, and everybody's happy. So that's the quick tour of Sun Pump Studios, where we spend so much of our time these days. And before we get into Q&A, I just want to remind everyone, like anything else, we're always happy to help on this topic, just like others. If you have a quick question, if you're like, hey, I've been trying to struggle with this thing, like I got this camera and I can't get it to feed into Zoom no matter what do I do? How do I get that into my computer? Give us a call, shoot us an email, whatever it is. If you having trouble with a green screen, we're always happy to jump on a quick call. If you want something more formal than that, we're happy to do that too. We've more recently than ever have been helping people build out studios and set themselves up at their own home and their office, and we're sending equipment places and just reviewing and recommending things. We just do it in a block of hours, so whatever's most useful to you, we're happy to just give you a block of hours and charge a reasonable fee for our time and go ahead and help there. But again, simple things, just give us a call, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to help with this. Same way we'd be happy to help how you build an introduction or build a relationship with the speaker bureau. This is just as important these days in the world that we're living in. So with that, I know it's a lot of information over 30 minutes, but I want to take a pause here and open it up for any questions and answer any questions that you may have. And if I don't know, let's see here. Okay, what's the model of the gray screen, the camera switcher, and the audio board? The gray screen is by a company called Lastolite. I think it's like Lastolite approximately. If you type that in, you'll find it. If you're familiar with equipment, it's actually Lastolite's owned by a company called Manfrotto, which makes tripods, which as much as I've gotten into this stuff, I don't understand the difference in these 80,000 tripods, but Lastolite makes it. There's very inexpensive ones in different sizes. The camera we have is a Canon EOS R, which came out, I don't know, a couple of years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago. It was the first camera that Canon made that was mirrorless, like the first nice mirrorless camera. So doesn't actually have that mirror in there. It's all kind of digital on the inside. They've since come out with 3 more, one that's less expensive, one that's more expensive, and one that's kind of similar in price. We've used that also for taking still photography time to time. So that's helpful in those things, or we use it at different, when we were going to events, we used it at events. So that's a helpful thing. The switcher is made by a company called Roland. The one we have is a V60 HD. It has 8 different inputs, HDMI, SDI, allows some good combination things. It's 1080p, so it's fine for Zoom, but we can't use it if we're doing like 4K recordings. We kind of stay away from it. To upgrade into 4K for something that Blackmagic or Roland makes, it is quite a bit more expensive, and this is a pretty easy to use solution. And last is the audio board. This is the newest thing that we changed. This is made by a company called Zoom, different than Zoom that we use for our software here to broadcast, but rather it's a company called Zoom that makes audio equipment. It's the Zoom LiveTrack L20, I believe it's called. And it's a digital mixing board. It does some recording. It does a lot of headphone routing, so I can hear something different than Connor can hear. Then I can send over to Zoom. If we have more people in here, that's important. Like right now, I don't want to hear my voice, but if Josh is on the podcast in like an hour, he's going to want to hear his voice, and it allows us to do all those sorts of things. We used to have a bunch of little inexpensive boxes that created noise, and this kind of combined everything into it. So it's pretty robust for those purposes, and does a nice job. Let's see here. Next question. What portion of the body of the speaker do you show in a keynote? Great question. If I could do what I wanted to do in this studio, personally, I would show all of me. I would do head to toe, and I'd put me next to the slides or have some kind of combination look. But this studio is super small, like really small. It's probably, I don't know, 9 feet by about 12 feet. And with all this stuff in here, it's crazy. So, but if I had more room, and I have a really wide angle lens too. So if I had more room, I would do full body, but I simply can't. This is about as zoomed out as we can possibly be in this room. And so that's what we're doing. So that's ideal. If you don't have that much space, kind of like how we are right here, I think it's important that you get as much as you can. Certainly, kind of this part from the top of the head down to the abdomen. If you can get a little bit more, that is great as well. Let's see. What are you using to stream your Canon? We are using something by a company called Magewell. Magewell, Magewell. They make a bunch of different devices. This happens to be the 4K device, which is probably overkill because we can't actually broadcast in 4K anyways because the signal coming out of the switcher is not 4K. But we thought it was a little bit more reliable, so that's why we went with it. But they make them. There's a bunch of companies that make them that are very, very good. Everybody from Blackmagic on down makes them, different price points. So that's great. Magewell, it really is plug and play. We always joke that a lot of stuff's not plug and play. That like they joke like, oh, get this equipment, it just works. It never just works. Everything takes some time and you have to learn. But the Magewell, even though it has all the software built in, tends to just work really, really well. Let's see. Next question. To use Ecamm, we do not use Ecamm. So I'm not super familiar, so I can't answer that well for you. Great. Elgato is one that's cheaper. Ecamm, that's great. Yeah, there's something called OBS, that's what it is, which we played around a little bit. It's essentially a video switcher on your computer that does a lot of these things, lets you combine slides and video without having this big board separately. So that's something to explore. I think it's free also, so you can't go wrong there. Everything's a trade-off. Everything has certain limitations and features. There's always like dollars versus time versus learning curve. So there's no like, oh, if I only had this, it would solve all problems. There's no one thing that potentially solves all problems. Let's see, going back to the top here. I have a Blue Yeti mic, and it definitely picks up a bunch of background noise. A lot of that's probably is true. A couple of things to think about. One is make sure the polar pattern's set correctly, so it's just the part that's at you. Number two, I would try and get the gain down as possible. And three, yeah, it will pick up some background noise. Like if it's on a table and you hit your hand on it pick it up. Any air conditioning or HVAC, it picks that up. So it's not perfect from that regard. You can get them and mount them on a stand that clips to a desk or a normal mic stand. You can get something that kind of takes away some of those vibrations, so that can be a little bit helpful. I see a question on here about 50% of an in-person fee back in April to go ahead and present virtually. Yeah, that's still generally what we're seeing. We're seeing about 50%. I don't know. I can argue and make a reason why that makes sense, but I could also argue that it doesn't. I think that the world's kind of been thrown into this situation and no one really knows what the right fee is, so we're seeing a lot of 50%, I could say, look, you're getting the same value. We're delivering the same material. It's essentially the same amount of work and it should be a lot more. But I can only tell you what we're doing. And we've been sticking around that 50% number for Josh. So in full transparency, his in-person fee is 35,000, but when we do things remotely, it's 17,500. And there's some flexibility there too, because I doesn't have to get on an airplane and go to California. So it's a lot easier. We're doing something in here tomorrow night for Dell. We're broadcasting to half of Dell's employees at 11 p.m. Eastern time, right from this spot. And we're doing the other half of Dell's employees in other continents the following morning around 11 a.m. And we agreed to do both of those for one fee. It's essentially the same keynote twice. Let's see, where are we at? How do you feel about not using slides? I found slides not engaging via virtual. We are more careful about the slides, certainly. So first of all, I like when you're able to do something like this where the slides are together with the person. I think it's better than Zoom or some of the other software where the slides tend to be a separate thing and you have to share your screen and there's less control over it. But the slides are they are not as good as in person. Videos also don't come over quite as well as you do in person. We do a lot of video stuff in our normal keynotes, and playing that over the internet is not as good. If you're going to play and share a screen through Zoom or any of these platforms, a lot of times they really reduce the frame rate, so it's choppy and the sound is not allowed with the video, which can be a challenge. So we work on that to kind of use some equipment here to get around it. But there's nothing wrong with going without slides. And frankly, I think in these kind of situations, there's a lot of reason to go ahead and not to use slides. How do you play video on Zoom when you can't upload the video? So there's a few different ways. One way is to just embed it in your PowerPoint. If you use PowerPoint, that works just fine. Another is if you are connecting your camera to your computer via a Magewell or Ecamm or any of these other pieces of equipment, you can also connect another computer that way to the computer that's using Zoom. So if you have two computers, you play the video on one computer, you feed it into that little device, comes out the other side in USB. It's treated as a camera by Zoom or something else, and then you're able to feed full frame, full feature video off to the internet to allow someone to go ahead and see it. It is not as it still has some limitations, but it has fewer limitations and tends to works pretty well. Let's see, any other questions here? Connor, can you go to the top? I don't know if there's anything at the top. What's the name of those lights? The Elgato key lights. Someone answer that. The split screen presentation. Oh, fine. Someone said sharing QuickTime is a good way to go, and there's less lag, which is pretty good. You missed my question about inbound lead flow. Where was that? Hold on. What am I seeing happen with things like inbound lead flow? Yes, we are seeing some of it come back. It is not as robust as it was before, no doubt about it. But I do see, I don't know, 1 to 3 pieces of activity per day coming in for at least for Josh. Like anything else, some of them are garbage or the fees are lower, but there is some opportunity out there. No one yet seems willing to commit very firmly to doing anything in person. And my personal opinion is, while I was hopeful that would have been changing this fall, I really don't think that's the case. I tend to believe that until there's a real change with this pandemic, I think that there's legal reasons and PR reasons and political reasons and safety reasons and a million others that local regulations, we're just not going to be getting large groups of people into a room in the near future. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably the better part of a year from now. Of course, some of that depends on, does the virus get worse this fall or get better? When do we get a vaccine? When do we get it to people? Are people feeling safe taking it? How well does it work? Do we need booster shots? All these kind of questions that we're dealing with now is going to affect that, no doubt. But I do think it's a while, unfortunately, which is part of the reason why we spent some extra time in here trying to figure out, all right, that was pretty good and it was fine, but like, this is now more important. Let's make sure that video really comes through all right, or let's see if we can fix that lighting once and for all, or, it'd be really great if I could hear this in my ear, because then I could interact with that person in a different way. What % down is the lead flow before COVID? Well, at one point it was down like 100%. Now I would say it's down, I don't know, without looking at the numbers, it's probably down still 60%, 65%. It's definitely lower. Absolutely, definitely lower. One thing though that I've, has been important for us, is those of you that have worked with us for a while, we consider bureau relationships very, very important, and those relationships continue to prove to be very important for us in this time. Often, speaker bureau agents are working with a small set of speakers who it's like, okay, you're a sales speaker, you're a cybersecurity speaker, you're a manufacturing speaker, whatever it is. They got their go-to list. Like these are my 3 or 4 go-to people when it comes to sales. I got this longer list of like 12 people that if I can't make it work with the first few, we found that being on that list right now is even more important. So when someone in our case is looking for an innovation speaker, we want to make sure that we're like number 1 or number 2 on that innovation list. And so when they reach out, that we'll quickly respond. We'll be accommodating. We'll solve their problems. I mean, if there ever was a time for us to say yes, we're saying yes now more than ever. Like we'll just we'll just probably do nearly anything to be accommodating and to help people out. We share a lot of these kinds of videos and sessions, not the Three Ring Circus one so much, but other ones to show people like this is what it's like. Here's the interactivity. Here's the feedback. Here's the testimonials we're now getting from clients where they're saying, well, that was great. I loved working with Josh. It felt like he was right there. Everything was so clear and smooth. He answered questions in real time. He customized it. We were worried about doing it, but it was a lot better than I thought. And we're seeing people get more comfortable with it. It went from like, oh my God, a video conference call for a keynote, that's terrible, to saying, okay, it's not as good. It's not really what I want to do, but given everything else, my organization is getting used to doing it. And we're going to go ahead and go ahead and make that happen. Can you talk a bit about the teleprompter? How much do we rely on it? And thoughts on sitting or standing? Yeah, so the teleprompter is by a company called Prompter People. Um, they have a bunch of different models. There's other companies that are less expensive. There's certainly companies that are way more expensive. They're sort of more a middle of the road, like kind of like if you're building your own studio, you could use them. The little nicer home studio, you wouldn't ever see that really in a television studio like at the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati kind of thing. It has a few pieces to it, as most teleprompters do. The image is projected on a monitor, so if you may see, there's a flat monitor kind of underneath the lens, and it's a reversed monitor. So it goes ahead, Connor's gonna show you. It flips everything backwards, like you're looking at the front of an ambulance, and ambulance is spelled with that mirror image. So we're gonna see if you can go ahead and see this. You're gonna kind of see yourself there, but this uh, here, down here, it's a little bit, well, it looks upside down to me, but this is it's a flat monitor and it's inverting the image. If you don't want to get one of those, as I realized before, but not as well as I should have, you can get a normal monitor and use the software to invert the image. But the reason why that mirror image is important is because there's some glass above it. And the glass is doing two things. One, it's allowing the camera lens, which is behind the glass, to come to me. But also, it's taking that image that's on this monitor and reflecting it back so I can go ahead and see what's on there. We do use it all the time. And then there's like some black drape thing that doesn't let light come in behind that mirror. It's got some Velcro on it and it's kind of wrapped pretty tightly around the camera. That's really the standard sort of setup. Whether it's an inexpensive $100 solution or something crazy expensive, that's the setup. We use it all the time, but we don't use it very much for the teleprompter. So we use it mainly to see other people on Zoom, or for if Josh is giving a keynote and here I'm recording it just to see his slides. So right now, what I'm looking at myself talking and the slides are next to me because that's just how we had it set up for today. Ideally, if we had a little more time, I'd switch it so I could see all of you and I wouldn't have to look down like I'm looking right now to go ahead and see all those questions. I see some good suggestions on here for Prompt Smart. The Prompter People comes with teleprompter software. They actually give you a license to use kind of in perpetuity. So standing versus sitting, we just recently started standing. We always were sitting before. That was the kind of our go-to position. But I think we found that the standing allows some more use of gestures. We kind of like this 2/3, 1/3 approximately setup. So we've been doing more standing. Of course, it's a little more tiring. I have to give a 6-hour session. We're doing a virtual boot camp coming up on Thursday. So after I'm standing in here at about 100 degrees after 6 hours in a sport coat, you might want to ask me again, and we'll see if I give a different answer. Let's see here. Always stand. Energy is much higher. Yeah, you can use all of the screen. Good advice, Steve. Uh, Good. What else did we miss? Prompt Smart Studio, a little better than the iPad app. It's great. Yeah, that's a great thing. We used an iPad for a long time. We had a first edition iPad that we used for years. It finally just stopped working and it was so old, but that worked just fine. We used an iPad software that we bought for just $5 or something on the App Store. It flipped it for you. We had a really basic mirror and it worked fine. It's not as good as this setup, but this has limitations too. I mean, I have some friends in the TV world and you go see their setup and it's like what you have is you get envious. But all these solutions are better than nothing, and it's pretty cool across the board. Uh Anything else? Are you still interested in the same? Are you still investing the same amount in AdWords? Have you increased or decreased? Um, no, we're not investing as much in AdWords. Full transparency, when this hit and we started seeing in March how quickly everything was stopping, we'd stopped spending on AdWords. Now, I would tell you that is from a marketing revenue perspective. I don't know that that's the best choice that we made at the time, but we started just trying to be responsible about having a business that's in boom times going into a business that's we were very worried was and somewhat has proven true was going to be in really kind of depressed times and a big recession, if not worse. And so just like all the things you would do, we started cutting expenses. And one of those was the lot of money that we were spending every month on AdWords. We've since gone back to that. It's not as robust as it was. I think we're probably spending, I don't know, I'm trying to remember what we were spending before. I don't know, about 30% of what we were spending previously. And we'll probably increase it again over time, but we're doing a little bit differently and we're thinking about it a little bit differently. So yeah, we're trying to still be careful with expenses there. Do I have a link to the sound dampening foam that we use? And Connor showed it to me because I don't remember. It's from the company called The Foam Factory, thefoamfactory.com, just as you think it would be spelled. And they have a bunch of different options there and send it to you in different packages. Let's see. What are the main speaking points you recommend in a short form 1 to 3 minute video promoting virtual keynotes? I think they are very similar to the 1 to 3 minutes that you would spend, or 1 to 3 minutes you would spend promoting a normal keynote, because you're selling ultimately what the problems that you solve for an audience and how they're transformed after hearing you speak, with relying on your expertise, and how the audience is going to feel and that they're going to be energized and excited and that they're going to have actionable takeaways. So all those things are the same. We are playing around with, for example, a new virtual demo reel right now that kind of shares some of the inside baseball about how the setup works, so that we can share, people can go ahead and see that we can do this and we can hear in real time and there's no internet issues and we can correspond, whether it's via chat or we can listen to people ask questions and we can hand off live. So we are showcasing some of those things. So I think that is important to see that we take this as seriously as we would take an onstage keynote. But other than that, I think the general reason that you would buy someone who's a keynote speaker to come speak to you, whether it is virtual or it is live on stage, are really the same thing. So it's pretty similar. Is prospecting any different for virtual talks versus live talks in regard to bureaus or cold leads? I haven't seen it be any different. I can tell you that we're not really doing many things differently. I mean, we've had different kinds of conversations and certainly checked in with many of our relationships to let them know what we're doing, let them know about fee structures, let them know about our capabilities. That has been important to us. We gave a talk. We were fortunate enough last week to have Josh from here give a keynote to IASB, the International Association of Speakers Bureaus. And of course, we did actually a little GoPro tour with this that we would, of course, not done. I don't know that I would even had him do that keynote at that point. But because enough has changed in the world and we're doing so much virtually in this with this COVID-19 fiasco, that I wanted to kind of use that opportunity then to go ahead and share it and let them know that we're here to help. And just in the same way that we would solve problems and say yes in normal times, we are going to do that here as well. Let's see. Anything else that we missed? Don't think so. Okay. Well, if anyone has any other questions that you think of after this, shoot any of us an email, give any of us a call, text message, whatever you need. We're happy to jump on a call. If you're looking for something more formal than just hour of our time, we're happy to talk about that as well. It's just like anything else we do. We're learning. We're along with you. This has changed so much for all of our businesses, and what we're relying on what we know and the things that are important to us, and continuing to grow and explore new opportunities. And kind of fall in love all over again with this business. But it's good to see everyone. We're continuing to try and do these about once a month, and we'll be back here in about another month with another webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.